Hi everyone, in today's video I'll be showing you how I did this tiger portrait using acrylic paints. Now for this particular painting, I'm doing it on a A2 size stretched canvas and I needed to do the initial sketch on a separate piece of paper. So I'm using ordinary normal printer paper. I took 2 sheets of A3 and I stuck them together with glue, and I'm using that to do the initial sketch for the tiger. Now this way I'm able to erase as much as I want to, and I can correct things, change things, and make it as accurate as possible. And I'm not using the grid method for this particular drawing. I did it freehand, so there's a lot of adjustments that I'm making, especially with the eyes. But once I've got that initial sketch down, I know that I've got an accurate sketch that I can then transfer to my canvas once I've done the background, painted in the background on the canvas. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the canvas when I put the sheet on there. Now I'm going to go in and paint in the background onto my canvas. I'm using a dark green. This is actually just the background. I am going to come over it with other colors. This is just to get the entire canvas covered so that there's no white of the canvas showing, and also just to have a background that I can build up on. So I've now stuck on with masking tape. I've just put on my sketch and I've got the white transfer paper underneath, and I'm using the same graphite pencil just to draw over the sketch. I sketched it quite light, so when I'm going over now I can see exactly where I have sketched and what I've left out, or any area that I have left out I can just go over it again. Okay, so once I'm using the white graphite transfer paper so that it can show on my dark background. So now that the sketch is on the canvas, I'm going in back with the background. I'm working through the rocks in the background. I tried using the palette knife there. It didn't really turn out well, so it turned out good, so I had to actually go back and redo that. Now I'm also just adding some background leaves. This is all quite dark, so it's only the layers that I'm building up. I'm going to go lighter as it goes, as the layers progress. So you're not going to see that much, especially with the glare of the camera. I'm sorry about that. The light is very bright in my studio, so some of that glare is making it even look darker because the glare is coming onto one side and then you can't see clearly. But that will get better as the video progresses. So you can see now I'm just basically adding in base layers for where the leaves are going to be, to show that there's foliage behind him, the tiger, and also going to go in with the rocks. Now I've done quite a few layers on this part of the painting because I was not getting the rocks correct or the way I wanted them to be. I was not getting the leaves the way I wanted to be, because if you look at it like this, you can't even see the colors that I've used. You only see it looks bright and it looks dark. You can see the drawing or the sketch of the tiger, but you can't really see the background. So I have tried to lighten that up a bit, but I am going to go back afterwards and work on the background. The background is not the focal point of the painting, but it is a crucial part of the painting because you need to have the background done well to bring the subject of the painting, make it stand out more, in this case the tiger. So okay, now again, I apologize for the lighting. I've got a lot of windows in my studio and the light was just too bright, and my camera was not allowing me to make it darker. If I tried to make it darker, it actually became too dark. So I hope going forward now you will be able to see what I'm doing. With the tiger, it's much easier than seeing the background because the background was so dark initially. But I'm going to come through later on after I'm done with the tiger and touch up the rocks in the background, the foliage, the grass, the leaves, all of that. This is just the initial background, just to give the painting some basically some depth and some idea of where everything's going to be. Basically, I'm just placing everything in the places it needs to be. I'm going to work on those a bit more as the painting progresses. So now I'm again working on the rocks again, trying to get them to be a bit more brighter, creating some of the depth of the different shadow areas and the lighter areas. And then I said, okay, since everything was placed in their places, I'll come back to that let me start working on the tiger. So now I'm working on the tiger. I'm putting in a base layer of a burnt sienna paint color just to get a base layer. It's a very thin, diluted uh, mixture of the paint because I don't want it to be too bright at this stage. There's certain areas that's going to be brighter. I am going to brighten this up a lot. I'm just trying to cover all the areas with the paint so that I know I've covered the entire tiger, and then I can work on the details. Now, the one thing I like to do is when I'm working on any painting, I like to work on the animal, especially if it's an animal portrait, I like to work on the eyes first. So you can see now I'm working on the eyes, just putting in some of that color of the pupil of the eyes, and I'm just adding some of the black around the eyes. Now I am using pure black for this, just to get the, it doesn't really show because the dark background is still there, but once I start adding the lighter colors, you'll be able to see the tiger more clearly, and you'll be able to see the stripes and the details much more easily. So you can see now I'm going in with the white, titanium white. Now it's not pure titanium white, it looks white, but it's actually a mixture of titanium white with some Payne's gray, because I want to keep it a bit toned down. I don't want it that stark white, although it does look white, but it's not actually pure white. I toned it down with some Payne's gray. So you can see now I'm going in and just adding in all the areas that need to be white, or that's going to be white. I'm just basically covering those areas. Okay, then now I decided to start working on the water a little. I'm using a Prussian blue color for the water that the tiger is in. And you can see I'm now just making sure I cover the edges of the canvas as well. And then now I'm just adding some of the reflections to the water from the rocks and the grass in the background. And now I'm adding the little ripples in the water of the light shining on the water and the little ripples around him. His reflection is also there. I am going to come and define that a bit more a little later. Okay, so now I'm going back in with again a layer of burnt sienna, but this time I'm leaving the paint a bit more thicker. I'm not diluting it too much with water, and I'm just going over the face area, and now I'm going into the stripes. Now I'm just darkening all the stripes with black paint, just so that I can have all of them showing, and I'm able to see wherever the darker areas of the stripes are going to be. So you can see I'm going in with black, and I'm just, because I want it to be really dark, because the background is dark, and obviously the background is showing through on the tiger at the moment because we haven't done many layers. So I'm just wanted to show that as I'm working on the stripes. So I want to darken those stripes up to really stick out. We are going to come through later again after we start adding more layers. We will darken them up again later on. So you can see now I'm going in again with the burnt sienna, and I'm varying the burnt sienna mixture basically with the water. The water is what makes it look more translucent, and by adding more water it looks more translucent, and then if you use it more pure pigment and less water, you're getting a more thicker paint, which obviously has a more saturation to the color when you put it on. Okay, so now I'm going back and forth. You'll see I'll be working on the body, and then I'll be working on the face. I just want to get all the areas covered, and then afterwards we can add the shadows and the highlights. At the moment I just want to get the tone or the colors for the fur. Now often people will think that a tiger is orange in color, and that's not actually true. It's actually a sort of different shades of burnt sienna. So there you can see I am adding white, titanium white. Again, this is not pure white titanium, not pure titanium white. It is diluted or mixed up with a little bit of Payne's gray just to tone it down a bit. I'm not keeping it too white. I am going to come and add some here and there, some hairs later on of fur areas with some pure white, but for the moment this is not all pure white, even though it does look that way. Okay, so now I'm going in with a liner brush. Now I'm using this liner brush to just define those fine hairs that are on the back of his fur, on the back of his head, and around the ears, the face. These liner brushes are the Mont liner brushes, and they actually, any liner brush will do. You will see me where I'm doing the bigger areas of fur. I'm going to be using a filbert brush for that. That can also be used to create the texture of fur. So now, but for now, I want those fine hairs, so I am going in with a liner brush and just basically covering up his face and getting all those fine details in. Now, a thing to remember when you are using a liner brush, try to pay close attention to your reference photo to see the areas that have to be in shadow, in highlights, and also the direction of the fur. All the fur is not in the same direction, all the hairs are not in the same direction. You need to pay close attention to your reference photo when you are drawing or when you are painting the fur of an animal. And remember, you don't need to add, because we've got the under layers underneath this layer we're doing now, we don't need to do every single strand of fur. We can do every strand of hair. We can do certain areas that give the effect, like if you want to brighten it up, we can do certain areas where the light is hitting his body. We can do that with a few strokes here and there in the area that we want to cover, just to define those fur or those hairs so that it looks like fur. But we also, like now I'm going in with the filbert, you can see, and I'm just covering in just to get a quick coverage of the entire area. I am going to come through afterwards and define that a bit more. So yeah, we don't want it to look too streaky or having all lines. Like at the moment his fur is looking like it's all just running lines down. We are going to now start adding in shadows and redefining those stripes so that we can get them to look a bit more realistic and also to bring them out a bit more. So now I'm going in with a very diluted mixture of the Payne's Gray just to darken up those shadow areas on his fur, wherever the shadows fall, under his neck, on his back, around his face. And then now I'm going in with a mixture with a slight bit of yellow ochre added to the burnt sienna just to get that lighter areas of his fur color. And I'm going back into the eyes and touching them up as well, because I was missing some, the highlights were not looking that right, and the colors also was a bit too muted sort of, so I wanted to get a bit of variety of the yellow and the green for the eyes, and also the shadow areas for the upper part of the pupil where the eyelids are. Obviously that area has shadows over the eyes. And then obviously I've added the highlights as well. Okay, so now you can see I'm working on the nose, or I was working a little bit around the nose. I'm going to come back to the nose. I'm still back by the eyes again. I want to really define those little hairs, and also the eyes themselves, the highlights on the eyes, to really make them look like as if they are an eye and they're moist and wet. And then now I'm just adding some little bits of fur. I'm just defining those with a lighter color. Now I'm just using a mixture with a little bit of white to that burnt sienna mixture, just to really brighten up those really light areas where the light is shining onto him, or where the light is reflecting off his fur. So now I'm just getting in those details. And the same with his body, paying close attention to the reference photo, seeing wherever the areas need to be lighter, lightening that up. We don't want everything to look uniform and the same, because his body is obviously in the water. Certain areas the light is hitting it more, there's going to be shadows, and then obviously the lighter areas where the light is hitting his body. So now I'm going in and just working from the face to the body just to define that fur. So now I'm working on the nose and I'm just putting a bit of pink. This is a mixture of pink with a hint of some burnt, burnt sienna, raw umber or burnt umber, not raw umber, just to give it a hint of a pink color, but we don't want it to also be too stark pink. We want to give it also some shadows, which is why I'm adding some Payne's Gray to the nose as well. You'll see later I come and define some of the areas and add the shadows in on the nose. And I'm also working now with the white, that is pure white. I'm just defining one or two hairs around the areas where it must be brighter, and also the areas around the nose. This is just to really brighten up the piece and make the tiger and his fur stand out. I'm also working on the area around the mouth. For the whiskers, I'm using a fine, very fine liner brush, which is a bit with the longer bristles. And I'm just using a mixture of the titanium white. And obviously it depends how much water you put in it in order to get it to flow as you are drawing in those whiskers. And also the little hairs by his eyebrows. Okay, now I'm just adding some final details to the piece, and also adding some little speckles of white onto the water, just to show the water with the brightness of the water and the little ripples on the water and the light hitting the water as well. That just adds a little bit of brightness to the water, since the water is quite dark. And now I'm going in back to the background again. I'm just defining some of those leaves with a light green mixture. I'm not covering all the leaves, only the ones that are supposed to be in the foreground. The ones behind these leaves, I'm leaving them a little darker so that they blend in with the background and they show the depth of the painting. So it looks as if you're going further into the background behind the tiger if you look at the painting. And just defining some of those grass and the little rocks around the background, the grass on the rocks in the background. And now I'm just going in and defining this big rock that's right behind him and adding some of the highlights and also defining some of those shadow areas. I don't want too much of attention to be paid on the rock behind him. He is the focal point, so I'm trying to focus on him, but the background is also important to bring him out as well. So I guess that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to like and share, and don't forget to subscribe. Till the next one, bye.